Welcome everybody to our final meeting of 2020, last days of 2020. Yes. I'll just give it a few more minutes to let people pop in. I guess we're at 4:04 now, so maybe we can go ahead and get started. So welcome everybody to our ANA Business Marketing Northern California second virtual event. We've got a bunch of people registered. We're thrilled to have you. We're doubling down on digital with Ted Kohnen and Dean Nicolls. Before we get started, just a couple housekeeping items. We have new branding. We mentioned this on our last event. The last couple times we've all been together, but just to remind you, we are no longer NorCal BMA. We're now part of the ANA. We're ANA Business Marketing of Northern California. Down here on the screen, this is our new website. So bookmark that so you can visit us. You can email us here at info@norcalbusinessmarketing.org. Make sure you whitelist our email communications. And before we get started, we want to thank our sponsors who make all of our programming possible. First of all, I want to introduce Matt Scott from Scott Design. Scott Design has been instrumental in helping us change our website, which was a huge feat. Thank you, among many other things. But Scott, can you just take a minute to share with everybody what it is you do so that they're aware of your services?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I hope all is going well. Scott Design supports corporate marketing teams with on-brand, high-quality communications created on challenging schedules. We kind of have a no drama, no nonsense approach to creative work, which our clients really like. We specialize in the design, writing, and development of emails, corporate newsletters, microsites, social media graphics, and web banners, along with some video editing services. Current clients include Adobe, Autodesk, and Intuit, along with SMBs, mainly in technology. Glad to everyone's here today. Nice talking to you, and enjoy the presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. And if you wanted to get in touch with Scott, get in touch with us, or you can link to their site on our website under the sponsors tab. Also, our other sponsors, Hushly. Hushly specializes in, if you have somebody come to your site and they abandon a reg form, Hushly are experts in getting those people registered as leads and converted. So get in touch with them. And then also WonderBench is a new sponsor of ours. WonderBench has started they're a company that is helping new grads find their first roles. We're thrilled to have them on as a sponsor. They've been helpful in getting us interns here. We love WonderBench. If you have a need for new hires, definitely get in touch with them. And then special mention to San Jose State University marketing program. So San Jose State University, just so you all know, all of you marketers, they have an honors program and they are looking for projects for their students starting next semester in January. Real world, real life experiences. They'll put a team of honors students on your marketing project and work on it all semester. If that's of interest to you, get in touch with David McFeely. His email is here, or get in touch with us and we'll put you in touch, but it's a great opportunity. They're looking for probably 8 programs. So that's there for you. And then with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Ted and Dean. We're so excited to have you here talking about doubling down with digital. It's been a crazy year, and I know you have a lot to talk about with how companies can capitalize on this unique time and talk about what you've been working on together. So I will turn it over to you, and let me stop sharing my screen. And Ted, I'm going to make you a participant. Allow you to share your screen. 1 second. We're all learning. Make host. There you go.
Yes.
Should be good.
Okay. Are we running a poll event before?
I forgot about that. But you're the host now. Do you see the poll at the bottom? Or should I take it back?
I do. So, yep. Oh, okay. I'm going to allow panelists to vote. No problem. I'm going to figure this out now. You can't see the poll just yet. If I launch the poll here. Okay. So on your screen, you should see, by the way, tell me if you don't see it, how did your marketing budget change from the beginning to the end of 2020? So if you think around January planning, what happened? Did your budget increase? If so, I was joking before, please send me your name. Did you previously have a really large offline or events budget that you needed to reallocate? Did your budget just get completely slashed and you really conserved what you could? Or did nothing change at all and it was really like any other year? Great. I see the polls numbers coming in here, and where it seems to be, love to see that nothing's changed. That's really positive. I'll just give it I'll give it a full minute since there's a handy little timer here. We'll give it another 5 seconds, and we see that people obviously reallocated their offline event budgets. You are certainly not alone. So I'm going to share the poll results right now. Can everyone see the results, or I think I have to share them? Can you see them now? Okay, thanks, Dean. Appreciate that. All right. So what we see, again, we just had this poll going for a quick couple of minutes. The reallocation of budgets, particularly those that had large offline budgets or event budgets, and that's interesting. That'll come in a little bit later in the presentation. And then certainly many had their budget slashed, but in some cases, people were able to go full steam ahead. And I think in the area, particularly Northern California, where we do have a lot of science and technology and biotechs as well, there were some companies that really needed to be out there. And Jumio is certainly one of those brands. So I'm going to pull up our presentation right now. Give me one moment. Let's see what's going on here. There we go. All right. I'm going to put in so everyone can see. Do you see one slide or two? Two. All right. Swapping displays. Okay. See the one? Good. Thank you. Thank you, my partner in crime, Dean. So yes, what Dean and I want to talk to you about today is the experience and insights we've had throughout, as Tanya was saying, this crazy year, and how that impacted our digital media presence during uncertain times. And I think this is important because we're not out of the uncertain times. Yes, we're all praying for the vaccine to come very quickly, but the vaccine's going to come, yes, but it's not going to change the dynamics that we saw among workers and B2B marketers through this year are certainly going to carry over into 2021. So a lot of the lessons that we've learned that we'll share with you, and hopefully you can implement into your own practices, absolutely are valid as we end this year and then move into the next year. So little quick introduction here. My name is Ted Kohnen. I'm the CEO of Retina, marketing technology company. We were the ANA B2B agency of the year. I'm joined by my partner in crime, our client, Dean Nicolls, who's the head of global marketing for Jumio. Now, both Jumio and Retina are global companies, but we're headquartered here in the Silicon Valley Bay Area. And certainly I've had a long relationship with ANA NorCal, so really happy to be back here presenting with Dean today. So Jumio and Retina first connected probably a little over a year ago, and then Retina was selected as their media agency of record to really help strengthen their brand positioning as, and we'll learn more about this, a leading global company offering AI-powered identity verification solutions. So what does that mean? And to go into more background on Jumio, Dean, I'm going to turn it over to you, and you can just tell me when you want me to move slides.
Great, thanks, Ted. Yeah, so my name is Dean, and I do head up marketing at Jumio. We've been around for about 10 years, and when Ted says that we do online identity verification, really what that means is that as people are creating new accounts online, whether that be at a bank or Airbnb or Coinbase, right? They're typically going through a process of proving that they are who they claim to be. And we got in fact, Jumio means just use my ID online. It's an acronym. And instead of asking them for, their mother's maiden name or, information about like where they live, which maybe pings a credit bureau, the way that our solution works, and I think many of you probably have gone through it, is we ask the user for a picture of their government issued ID. Could be a driver's license or a passport. And then we ask for a corroborating selfie. And then we make sure the ID is legitimate. Then we make sure the selfie is legitimate and the person in the selfie matches the person on the ID. We do that typically in seconds. And then we provide whoever our customer is, let them know that that person is in fact who they claim to be. So that's who we are. And we do serve a global roster of companies around the globe. And our mission when we engaged with Ted and the Retina crew was what we really wanted to do is change the perception of Jumio. So it says on the slide that we wanted to move from being a BPO. What a BPO is a business process kind of operator. And that means that we have the perception that this isn't true, that we rely on a lot of human beings to do identity verification, when in fact, we actually leverage a lot of technology and specifically a lot of AI to validate that the ID is legitimate, that the selfie is legitimate, and then AI is used extensively to compare the two pictures in the selfie and on the ID. But we still needed to change that perception. And so we embarked on this journey of perception shifting way back, I think it was in January, February, before COVID hit. And we actually committed to doing online advertising. Now, the one thing that you should probably understand about me is that I'm not much of a brand marketer. So, you know, I've worked at companies like Starbucks and Microsoft in the past, but my DNA is all around being more of a direct marketer. If I can't measure it, I don't want to do it. Right? I need to see the numbers. I need to see the ROI. So, embarking on brand advertising with Retina was, I had to have my arm twisted. But you'll see why we chose to go that route and why it turned out to be a very, very good decision for us. And so one thing in our space is growing pretty quickly. Now on the slide, it says, you know, it's moving from a $6 billion space from last year to a $13 billion space by 2023. It's actually, thanks to COVID, growing at a much faster rate, right? And the reason for that is more and more institutions aren't allowing people to go into a branch office, right? So if you want to create a new account, you pretty much these days have to do it online. And so for a lot of companies, they really weren't quite ready for that level of digital transformation. And so what that meant is that if they had new account onboarding processes that were offline, they quickly had to figure out how to make them online. So what we've seen is a much higher growth rate than 16%. And we think it's growing much faster because of COVID. So the folks that we target through our marketing, again, historically, this has been primarily through direct marketing like events and webinars and email, are different than what you might expect. So for many technology companies based in Silicon Valley, they're typically targeting the CIO or the CTO. We're actually targeting some different folks within organizations. And so one of those is usually people responsible for the digital experience, right? So more and more of our customers literally have, C-level people dedicated to making sure the user experience is optimal, because they realize they spend a lot of money getting people to their website. And if they lose them during the onboarding process, as they're trying to create a new account, all those marketing dollars they spent have been wasted. And so they need a quicker way to get them through that journey. We're obviously also focused on folks, that are involved with fraud prevention. As you move more of your kind of new account onboarding online, if someone claims to be Ted Kohnen, how can you know that they're really Ted Kohnen? And in some industries, letting a bad actor into your ecosystem can spell really bad news on a lot of fronts. If it's a bank, you could be opening the door for money laundering, right? If it's a dating site, you can imagine what happens, and we've seen it happen when you allow bad actors into your system. And so even for companies like Airbnb, when you don't know who your online customers are, it can really spell disastrous results in terms of from a trust and safety perspective, but also from actual fraud loss and reputation loss. And then the last audience that we focus on is around compliance. So many of the services companies we serve are in regulated spaces. And so we're often targeting, the chief compliance officer, the people that are responsible for managing regulations like KYC or AML. KYC stands for Know Your Customer. AML is anti-money laundering. So if you're in the financial services space, you're required to do a little bit of due diligence on online customers to make sure that they are who they claim to be. And so each of these audience has different pain points, and they're often at odds with each other. The folks in fraud prevention want to put up as many hurdles as possible to make sure they allow zero bad actors. But the more hurdles you put up, that means the more abandonment you're going to see during the onboarding process. So it's a little bit challenging of the folks we reach out to, but it's a very interesting mix of folks that we market to. Now, our objectives in 2020, which will probably be the same objectives for next year as well, is around building awareness and thought leadership, building a strong sales pipeline through demand generation, and enabling our sales team and our partners to sell our solutions more effectively. And so this, obviously, the first bucket is where we started to engage with Ted and with Retina to help not only kind of shift perception, but also just overall raise the awareness of Jumio as a brand. So I think with that, I think, Ted, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
All right, sounds good. Thanks very much, Dean, for setting the stage. So with that as the backdrop, the opportunity, the audiences, the objectives, what was our approach when we engaged with Jumio? And I think there was an initial approach, and then COVID hit, and then there was a pivot and a rethink. And to Jumio's credit, partnering with Retina to, well, how do we capitalize on everything going on right now? And I want to start off, before we get into the strategy, this quote from eMarketer, which I think really sums up the experience of B2B marketers. The unusual circumstances of COVID-19 are part of what has bolstered the market. Without in-person events, B2Bs are turning to digital ads to engage buyers, taking advantage of lower CPMs. And that was one of the questions back in the poll, and we see that B2B marketers have reallocated their offline budget, their conference, their trade show budgets to more digital marketing. Now, this eMarketer report came out August of this year, the B2B, US B2B advertising report, and it really talked about the trajectory both of digital advertising for the rest of this year and into 2021. So kind of with that as the backdrop, what were our strategic pillars when it came to Jumio and those objectives that Dean was talking about earlier? Fundamentally, we needed to have audiences relearn what they knew Jumio to be, right? They're not a BPO. Their use of AI, their technology-powered infrastructure, that's where they're at. And having people relearn about a brand begins with launching with high impact. So when you launch with high impact, you signal to the market that something was different, and create the motivation for audiences to dive in. And then on the heels of that launch, continue to tell and retell the story of Jumio, accelerating brand awareness by the use of different types of media channels that we used, creating content to create deeper connections, and ultimately creating the sense of what we call is targeted ubiquity. Now, if you want to create actual ubiquity, you can spend a few $100 million, do a Super Bowl ad and all of that. But in B2B, it's really around this principle of targeted ubiquity, using targeting, using the highest indexing type channels to make sure that your audience is feeling the brand. The old adage of 7 touches equals action, that they see your brand, they see your message multiple times in different channels. They get that feeling of surround sound. That's what we look to create for Jumio. And so, this strategy developed in January of last year, and then the world started to change a little bit. And what we started to experience was this digital surge in impressions. And I call this out from Bloomberg because our Bloomberg contact was so excited by this. He sent it to us. Our traffic and uniques across both desktop and mobile have been surging. The daily unique figures are almost double. And he sent me their traffic chart. And you can see in March, right around March 9th, well, what happened then? Companies started saying, okay, everyone go work from home. And everything started shutting down. So this created a very different type of media dynamic, meaning if you were in lockdown, quote unquote, which most of us are again, and you weren't going to conferences and trade shows, and therefore you weren't traveling, your information source now was primarily what was online. Add to that dynamic that you didn't have a commute anymore. Your commute was to your laptop. You were spending more time online. And we saw this surge in digital impressions, not just in the US, but globally, Americas, Europe, Asia, everywhere that we were marketing Jumio. Also, it wasn't just for more the general business publications such as Bloomberg. we were seeing it across the endemic, the B2B, the trade publications, the trade websites as well. It really was a universal dynamic, the surge in impressions. And we were able to capitalize on that. With the higher inventory and the lower demand for advertisers, we were able to experience CPM rates drop significantly. When we did our initial planning, and we planned in waves, multiple waves over the course of the year, we started out with an average CPM of $56, and it tracked with COVID. It started going down every quarter, every single month to when we last looked in September, down to $23. So what did that allow us to do? That allowed Jumio to buy more inventory, have greater reach, have greater frequency. And what does reach and frequency impact the most? Brand awareness, brand intent, consideration as well. So I wanted to share with you, just kind of illustrate the point a little bit more in terms of the pivot. If you look at, February 2020, again, pre-COVID times, a fairly evenly balanced media mix. 50% was digital, and of course that includes digital display, newsletters, emails, webinars, etc. 40% was traditional. There was outdoor in there. There was print, of course, and then some other, more custom programs. And then if you look at a snapshot from August 2020, when, we're in the thick of things quite a lot, we pivoted leading up to that very much digital, going from 50% of the allocation to 82% of the allocation. That, of course, coming from, traditional and other marketing. But I think what's important here in terms of the idea of doubling down on digital, if you're already running digital, it's not just about pouring more money into the channel you're already using. I mean, did we do that? Absolutely. We increased budgets and channels that we were already using, such as digital display, email, newsletters, but we expanded the digital ecosystem out to include podcasts, video and pre-roll advertising, programmatic and native advertising as well. The decrease in CPMs allowed us to try new channels, pilot new programs as well. So I wanted to share with you just some of the creative. If you're familiar with Forbes, which I'm sure we all are, their brand voice page. Now, Forbes was instrumental in a lot of ways. If we're trying to retell a story, the best way to retell a story is with content, right? I mean, literally retelling a story. Forbes brand voice allowed Jumio to host their own content around timely, topical issues. So it became almost like an editorial destination. You can see here in the header, the Jumio brand voice was in the innovation link. So one click away from the homepage, part of the main navigation, and then you'd land on a microsite type page where it had the Jumio branding. It had advertising, of course, but then it had the articles, and these articles would receive thousands, tens of thousands of views as well as be shared publicly, as well as show up on Google in top organic rankings. So again, from a brand perspective, being able to get out there, tell the story in a contextual way, in a visual way. And another example of this, Bloomberg Technology. Again, we didn't want to do the old, media saying of spray and pray, right? You buy as many impressions as you can get and pray something good comes back. But we look to be targeted, so I'm working on Bloomberg Technology, as well as whether those were international sites, such as the French site here, or going into specific vertical sites, such as education and healthcare. Now, the other benefit of the surge in inventory, the decrease in costs, was that we could learn a tremendous amount more quickly than we probably normally would. So we were able, as time went on, to adapt and dimensionalize our messaging. So know your customer, which works in some some industries, became know your students, know your patient, being able to tailor that message to the specific vertical. And we were able to test the performance to see which type of creative, which type of advertising and placements got the highest response rates. Now, one of probably the more exciting things that we did was we were running a real-time brand measurement tracker. So if you're familiar with brand research studies, the traditional way of doing that is you would run a survey with your audiences, ask them questions, have you heard of this brand? When you hear this tagline, what brands come to mind? And then you deploy your campaign, and then you rerun the survey at the end of the campaign, 6, 9, 12 months later. Now, the problem with that is you're waiting 6, 9, 12 months to see is your creative, is your messaging, is your media placements, are they working? And it's it's a little scary when you rerun that survey and it's not the results you wanted. So for Jumio, and Jumio being a great partner really embraced this, the idea of real-time brand measurement. So we had a platform that was measuring and benchmarking against their competitors on a real-time basis. So not only were we able to measure brand, we were able to drill down into channels and creative that were having the greatest impact on brand lift. So this bar chart that you see here is actual data from Jumio's campaign. And what we saw was here, in terms of a percentage brand lift, what we saw, so if this was all the creative, so Jumio had roughly a 9%, aided awareness went up to 9% on average. Now, what really drove that, we were able to see, was the custom programs, such as Brand Voice or some of the more integrated programs, really helped, content-driven programs, really helped to drive brand lift. The 300 by 600, some of the larger media units helped to drive brand. And we saw that some of the other maybe smaller units didn't have as much of an impact on brand. That helps us learn, that helps us optimize. One of the other things that we were able to see and take action on was frequency. So the amount of times an audience was exposed to Jumio's advertising. We were able to see that, okay, after an exposure of 7, then interest starts to go down. Okay, so why are we paying for more inventory after 7 touches if 7 touches is really where the peak is, where the spike is? So again, we're able then to optimize our campaign in real time. If we were measuring brand awareness the traditional way, very few optimizations would probably be able to take place over that year's time frame. So what does that mean from a results perspective? And I think ultimately the formula that led to the results was really having this real-time brand and demand measurement in place, especially during a wild time like this year with COVID and things changing and everyone needing to adapt. Plus the significantly greater digital inventory. The more volume you have, the more sure you can be in the data that you're seeing. Often in B2B, it's a little bit harder to come across the inventory you need. You don't want to make decisions based on a small amount of data, okay? Because a little bit more data could skew what you're seeing. So we had very stable data because we had a lot of data through all the inventory that we were receiving, which allowed for faster and really better campaign optimization. So going back to kind of the awareness lift I was talking about, I want to show you a couple of slides in that regard. So what we did was we benchmarked aided awareness for Jumio and their competitors. So you can see the nearest competitor benchmark at the start, so at the very beginning of the campaign, and then how it increased. And this chart was pulled as of 9 months later. The nearest competitor rose slightly, which given COVID, and as Dean was talking about, really the explosion in the market, in the business, not surprised that even, competitors who weren't running any advertising had a lift, but you can see Jumio's lift going from 3.1% aided awareness to 9.4 over, and this is their nearest competitor. And we benchmarked Jumio against 5 or 6 different competitors as well. So we had a pretty good view of the market. So aided awareness is good, but is your market, is the advertising help move the needle in them considering you? So we then further asked the question, which of the following identity verification companies would you consider buying from, right? We had a benchmark for that. And Jumio and competitors around the same level. Actually, everyone was around the same level. Of course, given this year and the interest, these numbers were going to go up, and you saw you can see here in red, the nearest competitor goes up. but you see what happened with Jumio in terms of consideration lift, and that audiences were 2.3 more times more likely to buy from Jumio than their nearest competitor. So again, great metrics to be able to share. And then as part of this program, it wasn't just brand everywhere. We were also driving leads. And every time we put a plan in front of Jumio, we were always saying, this is how many leads we can expect. This is where they're going to come from. And actually, at the end, we were 70% above lead projections. But it was also the quality of the leads that came in. It was the brands, some of which you see here across financial services and healthcare. But when we dove in and looked at the people, the contacts associated with it, they were the right titles. They were senior decision makers in the right departments as well. I mean, anyone can get a new brand on their lead sheet, but it has to be really the right quality of person that they're going to talk to. And then with that, Dean, I'll let you kind of share your business performance.
Yeah, so we had a great Q3. I mean, our Q1 was tough, but I think everyone's Q1 was tough. But thanks in no small part to all the efforts we did with Retina, we had I think it was actually our best quarter ever in Q3, and we're looking to have a great quarter this quarter as well. And so the one thing I should just point out about the previous slide was that when we started and embarked on this journey with Retina, we weren't expecting leads, right? When you think about brand advertising, you don't think about, I mean, that's kind of a secondary consideration. So that was a very happy result. I think the other thing with brand advertising, that we discovered is that everyone's trying to get a piece of each other's attention, and attention is just fleeting, right? And so it gave us a new avenue for getting on people's radar, and especially some of those content programs that Ted shared with you, with the Forbes brand voice, for example. And again, when you talk about brand advertising, people aren't thinking necessarily kind of content driven awareness, and that had a huge impact on our results.
Dean, you want to keep going and talk about some of the key takeaways and learnings for the audience? Yeah.
So, so I've highlighted some of these a little bit already, but I think first of all, that online advertising is becoming, an even bigger B2B channel than we thought, especially during COVID. We were, if you want to say fortunate, I hate saying that, but we took advantage of this inventory. So as people were running away from a lot of marketing channels, we dove headfirst into online, and we benefited from that. We got a lot more reach because of the dissipating CPMs. We could reach a much bigger audience than we could have during other periods of time. And I'm sure in time those CPMs are going to creep back up again, but it was lucky, or it was dumb luck. And we honestly hesitated as we started to go into the COVID. Should we pull the plug? Because is it now the wrong time? And we didn't. And I think that was a smart decision in hindsight, because while a lot of our competitors were running, we dove right into online advertising, and I think generated some pretty nice results. The second thing is, and obviously this is super important for me as a more of a direct marketer, is the ability to track awareness and purchase intent levels in real time. So instead of having to wait 8 months before your campaign runs and then figure out if you move the needle on awareness, we're able to get these kind of monthly pulse checks, and even sometimes bi-weekly. Are we moving the needle on awareness? And the one thing, it may have been unclear, like how do we do that? Just really quickly, the way we do that is we're advertising on like 20 to 30 different websites. And what happens is we will pop up a question. So before you can access some of the content, we ask the users of those websites to just answer the question, which of the following companies have you heard of? Right? That's how we got the results from it. And because we're getting those results throughout the entire run of the campaign, that's how we're able to kind of get a sense of what's working, what's not working. And I didn't even know that was possible, because I guess I'm very old school. I thought, you do it at the beginning, you do it at the end. But getting the pulse checks allowed us to course correct in real time and to tweak our creative. And I think that helped a bunch, because we could course correct and we could just generate much better results and click-throughs than we could otherwise. Another part of that is number 3, be prepared to never stop testing, tweaking, and experimenting. And if you are of a direct marketing background, that's just how you're wired. That's how I'm wired. That's how Ted's wired, and Retina. And so we're testing a lot. We're testing when we first rolled out with the first wave of this campaign, virtually all our ads were more generic, right, across all the different publications. And then as we got into the second wave, the second and third quarter, and the last wave, all of a sudden, if you're on a healthcare site, then you start to see photography that has to do with healthcare. And the headline changes from, KYC, know your customer, to know your patient. So we start to get really more granular and more specific based on where we're advertising and how we're advertising. And that, not surprisingly, ends up getting us much better results in click-throughs. And then lastly, look for opportunities to negotiate and bundle lead gen tactics as part of the overall digital advertising buy. So Ted and his team did a pretty masterful job of not just getting the banner ads, but getting us, like, for example, email campaigns, getting us even negotiating like webinars with the web property. And that helps generate not only more awareness, but an awful lot more leads as well. So these were some of the big takeaways from my perspective.
Great. Thank you very much, Dean. Now we'd like to open it up to Q&A, which I think as moderator, I still have control, or Tanya, I can pass it back to you. You're on mute.
Hi. I have some questions here. I don't know if you have more there.
Oh, no, go for it.
Okay, great. And that was awesome. Thank you both. A lot of questions here. So one is, how did you map the brand lift efforts to leads and then to sales? Yeah.
So one of the things that we had to do, so we used a platform, so Nielsen, Nielsen Brand Catalyst, I'm trying to remember the name of the platform myself, or just Nielsen Brand Tracker, is a platform that actually gave us this visibility. And of course, we probably all know Nielsen, been around for a long time, one of the more credible data companies that are out there, data analytics and intelligence companies that are out there. But what also we were able to see was correlations as well. In some cases, you can't draw a direct line from A to B, but we can see correlations as well. We can see when there were spikes in certain media activity, and then spikes in awareness, and then spikes in leads as well. So we're correlating the different changes, particularly because we're always testing and rolling. We're correlating the changes to one another. And typically, what I have found is marketers a lot of times can get hung up on trying to find like the exact explicit thread from A to B. And actually, a lot of value can be found in just determining the correlations that you're seeing, at each stage of your buyer journey or your funnel.
Awesome. Okay, and then we have another one, same person. Is organic SEO being considered at all, or is this all about paid search advertising and other channels?
Dean?
Do you want me to take that one?
Yeah, go for it.
When we started this engagement, I wasn't thinking about SEO at all. I was thinking purely, I kind of had my focus was on awareness and how can we increase awareness of the Jumio brand. What has happened, it's I don't think it's a complete coincidence, but we've benefited quite strongly from SEO, and it has to do mostly with those content syndications. For example, Ted talked a little bit about the Forbes Tech Brand Voice. When you're having stories show up there, and honestly, it was like 4 or 5 news stories a month we were putting up on Forbes. The SEO juice from that it's hard to measure. It was significant, right? And if we were only doing online advertising, I don't think you would see much of an SEO bump. But when you combine it with the content syndication, whether it be on Forbes or Bloomberg and a variety of other places as well, it had a pretty substantial boost to SEO.
Great, thank you. You mentioned the best sales quarter ever. Congratulations.
Thank
and
you.
Will you be doing more of the same going forward? What's next for 2021?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's part of it. Now we're absolutely. I mean, we're pivoting a little bit in that we're making it a little bit less about awareness and more about demand gen. And again, that seems like an oxymoron. Like, how do you do brand advertising and generate more demand? And a lot of it has to do with changing the calls to action. So these weren't my ideas; these were Retina's ideas. And so when I told them, like, is there a way we can move the needle on demand gen more? And they've essentially developed a plan for 2021 that does just that. So the overall goal is still to lift the awareness and keep the awareness where it's at, or potentially grow it. But can we take more of those visitors and turn them into leads through better calls to action.
Yeah.
And that's precisely what we're doing.
Yeah, it's really about actually leveraging the lift that Jumio experienced in 2020, and as Dean was saying, turning that into demand. Okay, now that we got the awareness, pivot to demand and really take that really high consideration metric, out for a test drive and see how it can not only drive more leads to the top of the pipeline, but also further influence the velocity through the pipeline as well in 2021.
But do you have to keep that branding up at the same time?
So the way that we've constructed the plan is that we still have brand elements, but it's where we're at a sustaining level. So we're not looking to grow brand, we're looking to sustain it while growing demand, because we want to be careful. We don't want to lose the awareness. We don't want to lose the consideration that we've built up either.
Okay, and then you mentioned taking advantage of low costs. Is that changing now?
No. So the two, regarding cost, no, we still see CPMs and CPCs at the lowest level I've seen in 20 years, quite honestly.
Wow.
But also the ability to negotiate, the ability. My apologies if there's any media reps on the call here, but to talk with a media rep and be able to say, okay, thanks for the proposal. Well, we can do it, but we're going to do it for this amount. And can you also throw in this and that? And getting those for our client it's less of a challenge these days than it ever has been, because publishers are seeing that they have a lot more inventory, and a publisher never wants to serve up house ads, right? They don't, because house ads mean no one wants to advertise on your site, essentially. Again, my apologies to media reps on the call. But so, and they don't want to run blank ads. They don't want to have blank spaces. So they actually want to fill, and they're willing to take something than nothing. And we're absolutely willing to capitalize that. And you see that a lot more in B2B than you would on the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times or publications like that.
And this is for Dean and kind of related maybe, but is your budget, your online advertising budget, increasing or decreasing in 2021? Do you know?
It's actually staying pretty flat, and it was significant. So it's still a good 30 to 40% of our overall budget is on digital because of what we've been able to prove. The one thing I guess I think is also worth noting is that this kind of advertising, which I think is fairly sophisticated and nuanced, and does require that you can, you got a good, digital agency that can create great ads, and you can tweak that and you can create great content. But most of other companies that I think are mid-market, like technology companies, specifically in the Bay Area, this kind of advertising is often reserved, I think, for the big boys, the Amazons, the Microsofts, and the Adobes, right? But this is a very approachable space for mid-market. Now, I'm grateful that hopefully not a lot of my competitors are on this call, but most of my competitors rely on kind of old school methods of marketing. I mean, like events and webinars. And frankly, people are zoomed out. I mean, there's just so much Zoom fatigue. Like, I know we're on a webinar now, but I'm not sure if I can take another webinar, right? And so just being able to reach the audience through a different way, and to influence them, through some of that content that we talked about is, I think, super important. And so, and you don't necessarily need to do it on a shoestring, but you can enter the space, and I think it's a channel that's largely ignored by a big chunk of B2B marketers, specifically like in NorCal and Silicon Valley.
Okay, so I guess another related question for you. Have you done trade shows and conferences in the past, and will you go back to those when possible?
We're actually probably so there's different kinds of trade shows, right? So there's the big ones, the massive kind of conferences, and then there's the smaller ones. I think the smaller ones are toast. I mean, at least for us. The bigger ones, even them, the ROI has always been challenging, right? So, when I'm spending money on digital, or I'm spending money on SEO or PPC, I can draw a line for my ROI. Trade shows have always been, for me, super challenging to justify the ROI. I think there's probably a handful of shows we have to go to just to have a presence. But I think I'm going to be spending as little money as possible on trade shows going forward. I mean, to 2021 and beyond, beyond the ones I feel like we have to be at.
But that for you has changed or is the same?
No, because I think honestly, trade shows were probably 30% of our budget. Next year, they're going to be about 7% of our budget.
Wow. Okay. And then I guess for you, Ted, and you were talking about, or no, it was Dean, you were talking about being zoomed out, but I guess for both of you, but what are your thoughts on newer social media channels like TikTok for B2B marketers or any other newer channels?
Yeah, we get that question a lot, actually, quite honestly, and even, you know, the use of social media influencers for B2B. I think, you know, the first question, not to answer a question with a question, I think it ultimately depends on two things. One, is your audience on that platform? I think that's important. So if they happen to be on TikTok, great. And does the particular social media channel align with your brand personality, right? You know, there are some older Bay Area technology companies. I think it would be very much a mismatch to be on TikTok. There are some really awesome, energetic, like Jumio, brands that, you know, I could see their personality fitting in well with a platform like TikTok that you would be surprised to see. So I think it all comes down to, does it align with your brand tone and sensibility, and is your audience there? But like I tell a lot of our clients, let's pilot it, right? Let's approach it as a pilot. Let's learn from it. And you know, what's interesting now is, you know, Instagram came out with their Reels, you know, I think now a couple of months back. So a little bit more of a competitor to TikTok, and B2B brands are really more taking advantage of that. I think once they've been able to master that, the Instagram Reels, then they can move over to something like TikTok. But I don't rule anything out, quite honestly. Any channels out.
I'm not on TikTok yet.
Yeah, I like that.
Well, maybe with that, we can go to our second poll and see what people are planning on for 2021. I think you're still the host if you're able to pull that up, Ted.
Let's see.
So I think you do the drop down.
Oh, I do have poll too. Okay, let me launch poll. You can see it?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Where will your organization be investing most in 2021? And this is select all that apply on this one. So branding, content, PR, media outreach, paid media, social, demand gen, lead gen, marketing, technology stack, research studies. We'll give people a few seconds to make their selections. And I think that you have control, Ted.
I do, yeah. You can let me know when we're at, let's see, we've got 9 out of 17. Yeah, a couple still coming in. Yeah, because it's interesting. I can see this moving in real time. So 10 more seconds, right at a minute. I'll end the poll and share it now that I've got the hang of it.
Well, while you're doing that, I have one more question for you.
Sure, go for it.
How does a company get a Forbes slot?
Give us a call. No, it's you know, it's there's a lot to it. One is certainly the content, the type of brand you are, the content that you have, and obviously the alignment with Forbes and Forbes as an audience. And then, you know, we make brand voice happen ultimately.
Awesome.
All right,
so with that, what's the crystal ball say for 2021?
Let's see. Share results. Can you see it?
Yes.
Yeah, it's
so it's people are looking for the sales in 2021, it looks like.
And, you know, it's interesting, you know, it's kind of the connectivity between some of these. So content, which is so needed for demand and lead gen, and paid media and social being, you know, lead gen channels as well. So what I get the sense of, especially with talking with clients of ours, is that they're actually trying to recoup any losses from earlier this year as quickly as possible next year as well. So demand gen is becoming a very big part of their mix.
Interesting. Well, I think that might wrap us up for the evening. This has been an awesome conversation, so informative, great energy. We really appreciate so much information. Thank you. Thank you to Ted and Dean, and also to our board and sponsors and all of the attendees. Thank you so much for joining. And I don't know if you have anything more to add, Ted or Dean, before we wrap it up.
No, just happy holidays to everyone. Dean,
Yes.
and then if you want to close us out.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. I appreciate the time, and yeah, have the best of the holidays.
Thank you, everyone.
Everybody will be
We
with
need
you.
to get this year over.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.